The single most profitable deception in food history didn't start in a kitchen. It started in a factory. For thousands of years, humans thrived on butter, nature's gold. Then, almost overnight, we were manipulated into trading it for a grey, industrial chemical experiment. They told you it was for your health. That was a lie. The dark financial truth is that this was never about your heart, it was about turning toxic garbage into gold. Welcome to the Great Inflammation. Con. The story of how an industrial waste product became the foundation of the modern diet, and why it's been making us sick for over a century. To understand the betrayal, you have to look at what this stuff actually is. Before it was on your dinner table, cottonseed oil was classified as toxic waste. It was a byproduct of the cotton industry, garbage that was illegally dumped into rivers until the fumes became so noxious the government intervened. At best, it was used as fertilizer. At worst, it was a pollutant. Nobody in their right mind considered eating it. It was poison. Enter Procter & Gamble. They weren't trying to feed the world. They were soap and candle makers desperate for a cheaper ingredient to cut costs. They realized this toxic sludge was virtually free because nobody wanted it. But there was one massive problem: it was a liquid, and it smelled absolutely terrible. To make it profitable, they needed it to mimic the texture of lard. They needed to disguise the waste as food. This is where the Franken-science began. They utilized a process called hydrogenation. By blasting this grey, smelly industrial runoff with metal catalysts and applying intense heat, they forced the chemical structure to change. They took something that should have been used to grease machinery and bleached it until it was white, creamy, and odorless. They called it Crisco. It looked like food. It cooked like food. But chemically? It was a synthetic experiment that the human body had never encountered in history. Here is the part that should make you angry. They didn't just quietly slip this into the food supply. They audaciously marketed it as better than the real thing. They claimed this factory-bleached chemical was purer and more digestible than the animal fats humans had eaten for millennia. It was a masterclass in corporate gaslighting. They took a product that was arguably toxic and sold it as the epitome of cleanliness. They convinced the public that the factory was cleaner than the farm. They knew people wouldn't just switch on their own, so they infiltrated the American home. They distributed millions of free cookbooks to housewives. But these weren't just recipes, they were corporate propaganda. Every single recipe banned butter and lard, demanding Crisco as the only option. They systematically rewrote the rules of cooking to serve their profit margins. They brainwashed an entire generation into believing that a lab experiment was superior to nature. The most terrifying part? They did this without a single safety test. Not one. They fed a chemically altered substance to millions of people without knowing if it was safe for human consumption. There were no long-term studies. We were the test subjects. And as we are about to see, the results of that experiment would be devastating. The consequences would take decades to reveal themselves. By the mid-20th century, the betrayal deepened into a full-scale war. The industry wasn't content with just sharing the shelf with butter, they wanted to annihilate it. This is where the deception shifted from simple opportunity to predatory calculation. They weaponized poverty. In the post-war era, as families struggled to stretch their budgets, the industry launched a ruthless campaign positioning margarine not just as a substitute, but as the smart, modern choice for the frugal housewife. They preyed on financial insecurity, selling a grey, industrial filler for half the price of nutrient-dense animal fats. The marketing message was clear and manipulative. If you cared about your family's future, you bought the cheap stuff. They essentially taxed the poor with malnutrition, replacing nature's energy source with empty, synthetic calories. But the price tag wasn't the only weapon, they needed a moral high ground. This is when they fabricated the health halo, arguably the most dangerous lie in modern nutrition. They took these partially hydrogenated oils, loaded with artificial trans fats, and slapped "heart healthy" labels on every tub. It sounds impossible today, but for decades, the very poison that was calcifying arteries was sold as the cure for heart disease. They demonized saturated fats, which humans had eaten for thousands of years, and presented their factory-created trans fats as the savior of the American cardiovascular system. It was a complete inversion of the truth. There were voices of reason, but they were systematically silenced. In 1957, a researcher named Fred Kumerow looked at the tissue of people who had died from heart attacks. What he found was shocking. Their arteries weren't clogged with the saturated fats from butter, they were packed with the trans fats from margarine and shortening. He tried to warn the public. He screamed that these oils were the problem. But the industry giants, protecting their massive profit margins, ignored him. They buried the dissent, ensuring that his warnings wouldn't reach your dinner table for another 50 years. We need to understand the biological horror of what they were actually selling. Partial hydrogenation isn't just cooking, it is molecular vandalism. By bombarding vegetable oils with hydrogen, they twisted the molecular structure into a shape that does not exist in nature. The human body literally does not have the enzymes to process it effectively. It's not food, it is closer to a plastic. When you eat it, your body doesn't digest it, it deposits it. It integrates these warped molecules into your cell membranes, stiffening them and disrupting cellular communication. This was the miracle product they promised would save your heart. The deadly irony is almost too much to process. The product they promised would save you was actively destroying you. As the consumption of soybean oil skyrocketed by over 1,000% during the 20th century, so did the rates of chronic disease, obesity, and heart failure. The correlation is undeniable, yet the industry managed to pull off the ultimate sleight of hand. As Americans got sicker and fatter while eating more vegetable oil and less butter, the experts kept shouting that we just weren't cutting butter enough. They blamed the innocent bystander for the crime committed by their own invention. The horrifying reality is that for the last century, you have been an unwitting participant in a massive, uncontrolled biological experiment. We often assume that if a food is on the shelf, it has been proven safe. The unbelievable truth is that we are only now seeing the long-term data, and the results are catastrophic. You might be wondering how they got away with this for so long. How did the science seemingly support them? The answer lies in a concept called healthy user bias, and it is the smoking gun of nutritional research fraud. For decades, the studies that demonized butter were rigged. Here is how they did it. In the major observational studies, the people who continued to eat butter during the height of the anti-fat hysteria were often people who ignored all health advice. They were more likely to be smokers, heavy drinkers, and sedentary. In contrast, the people who switched to margarine and vegetable oils were the rule followers. They exercised, didn't smoke, and watched their weight. The researchers compared a group of unhealthy smokers to a group of health-conscious joggers and concluded that the butter was killing them. It was bad science used to validate a profitable lie. Now we are seeing the physiological cost of that lie, specifically regarding inflammation. The heart-healthy vegetable oils, specifically the industrial seed oils like corn, soybean, and canola, are flooding your body with omega-6 fatty acids. While we need some omega-6s, the modern diet provides an overdose, fueling a silent fire of inflammation that burns at the cellular level. This chronic inflammation is the root cause of almost every modern metabolic disease. We must make a critical distinction here, because not all plant oils are the enemy. This is where the nuance matters. Fruit oils, like olive oil, avocado oil, and coconut oil are generally extracted by simple pressing. They are stable, natural, and historically safe. The villains are the industrial seed oils, soybean, corn, cotton, canola. These require harsh chemical solvents like hexane just to extract the oil, followed by deodorizing and bleaching. If you have to use a chemistry lab to get the oil out, you probably shouldn't be putting it in your body. The damage goes beyond your heart, it is attacking your brain. We now know that the gut and the brain are inextricably linked via the gut-brain axis. Industrial seed oils disrupt the gut microbiome, killing beneficial bacteria and damaging the intestinal lining. Since 95% of your body's serotonin, the happiness hormone, is produced in the gut, this disruption leads to a direct crash in mental health. The rise in anxiety, depression, and cognitive decline parallels the introduction of these inflammatory oils into our food supply. The bombshell revelation from the most recent, unbiased data is that butter was never the villain. It was the scapegoat. The saturated fats in butter are stable, they don't oxidize and cause the kind of systemic chaos that industrial oils do. We traded a stable, nutrient-rich fat for an unstable, inflammatory chemical storm. The message is clear: stop obsessing over the fat content on the nutrition label. That is a distraction. Start looking at the processing method. If the ingredient list reads like a chemistry set, it's not food, it's poison. This wasn't a mistake, it was a calculated trade. They sacrificed our health for their profit margins, replacing nature's gold with industrial-grade sludge. The "heart healthy" label on seed oils is arguably the most successful marketing lie of the century. The only solution is rebellion. Reject their industrial experiments and return to real food like butter and fruit oils. They lied to you once about what keeps you healthy. Don't let them do it again.